Opening day is tomorrow. For the most part, rosters are set. Who are some of the prospects that earned big league jobs in 2023? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, editor-in-chief of BravesToday.com, freelance baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen. Every single day, we're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at FanDuel. The FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. Opening day is tomorrow. I am so excited to finally get actual baseball games that matter in MLB. We had the World Baseball Classic, tons of fun. Those games obviously mattered as well, but Major League Baseball is back. And so there are some prominent prospects that won jobs in 2023 and a couple surprising ones that didn't. Opening up with some of the surprising guys that won jobs that we didn't necessarily think would happen, let's go to the Yankees. Anthony Volpe, one of the top prospects in all of baseball, number one prospect in this system. The common assumption entering spring training this year was, since Oswald Peraza had been up last year at the end of the year, and they finally started to use him in place of Isiah Kiner-Falefa as they got into the playoffs, the common assumption was, okay, he's going to be up. He'll compete with, Peraza will compete with IKF to be the shortstop, and Volpe will be a midseason call-up or later, maybe towards the end of the year, and they'll get him a little bit of service time and let him contend for the 2024 Rookie of the Year. Not what happened. The Yankees did not play service time games. They remember the conversation about the prospect promotion incentive, having a prospect who's on two of the big three prospect lists up on opening day, them getting a year of service time, and being contenders for awards. And so Anthony Volpe is going to be the opening day shortstop for the New York Yankees. Oswald Peraza was optioned to the minors. Isiah Kiner-Falefa has been taking reps in the outfield to cover center field, things like that. And so Oswaldo Cabrera can play anywhere. Isiah Kiner-Falefa, they've decided they're going to use him playing just about everywhere. And it looks like on opening day, Cabrera is probably on the bench. Aaron Hicks looks like he's going to be the opening left fielder, which there's better options you could do. But either way, Anthony Volpe is now making the roster on opening day for the New York Yankees. This does change some things when it comes to the Rookie of the Year race. The favorite is still Gunnar Henderson. He is still number one. Masataka Yoshida of the Red Sox had moved up to number two at plus 600 after his showing in the World Baseball Classic, and I took him in the third round yesterday in our Rookie of the Year draft. If you missed that, go check it out. It's the podcast before this in the feed. But now, Anthony Volpe has the third best odds in the American League at plus 650 to be Rookie of the Year. So, fantastic there. Another guy who is high on the list for Rookie of the Year is Jordan Walker. We already covered this a little bit, but he has officially made the squad in St. Louis, and so he will be part of the team on opening day. Now, obviously, the big question here is play time and where will he play? You've got Tyler O'Neill for center field. You've got Lars Nootbaar, who's probably going to be a right fielder. You can play Jordan Walker in left, I assume. But you do still have Dylan Carlson, and you do still have Alec Burleson. So you have multiple options for the outfield. I mean, you have five guys, and I'd argue Burleson's probably, they're looking at him as a backup outfielder. So you have four guys for three spots. And Nolan Gorman is now going to be used mostly as a DH now that you no longer have Albert Pujols taking that DH job. So, utility man, do everything guy Brendan Donovan is starting at second base right now. while Tommy Edman is at short because of the injury to Paul DeJong. When Paul DeJong comes back, there's a very good possibility you see a little bit of shuffling. And so Brandon Donovan becomes free to cover at a lot of different positions. But again, you've got 4 or 5 outfielders now on this team. Who plays where? I do think, and we say this quite a bit, but depth will always work itself out. I would rather have one too many starting caliber outfielders on opening day than one too few. Shout out to our friends in Oakland. And it seems pretty obvious to me that you're going to see just about every year, you see a Cardinals outfielder go on the injured list with something. So Carlson, Newt Barr, O'Neill, somebody's going to get nicked up, somebody's going to be hurt, and you'll have your 3 starters to play all 3 games, or to play every day, and it won't be as big of a deal. But the big deal is he made the team. Another outfielder that has confirmed, has made the team, and will be a starter on opening day is outfielder Oscar Colas for the White Sox. He, the amateur free agent last January out of Cuba, shot through the entire minors last year, will be the opening day right fielder. It's something where they signed Andrew Benintendi to play left. You have Luis Robert Jr. in center. You have the ability now to take Eloy Jimenez and DH him, and Oscar Colas can be in right field. So, another promotion, really excited about that. One that we saw coming, but still happy for it. Shortstop Ezequiel Tovar with the Rockies. One of the top prospects in baseball. Got a cup of coffee last year towards the end of the year. It was a little bit questionable about what the offensive performance was then, but they feel really good about what he's going to be able to do this year. Another fun note is Elhuris Montero, former prospect, the main piece of the Nolan Arenado trade. Looks like he will be a starter at third base now that Ryan McMahon has moved to second because of the injury to Brendan Rodgers. So, Elhuris Montero, he is competing with Mike Moustakas, but it feels like it's Montero's job to lose. Really curious to see what he does. I can see a bounce back year from the former top prospect, Montero. Batting around 250 with a slugging of about 430 or so and, double-digit home runs would be, depending on play time between him and Moustakas. But I don't feel like Moustakas has fixed the problems that plagued him in the 2 weeks since he's been gone from the Reds. So, outfielder Esteury Ruiz has made the Oakland A's roster, and they are designating for assignment Christian Pache. So, Pache was one of the 2 big returns in the Matt Olson deal, along with catcher Shea Langoliers. Langoliers will be the starter at catcher on opening day. But Pache, for the most part, they're already kind of writing that off. He's out of options, and so you have to expose him to waivers to get him to the minors. It really feels like there is a team out there. I'm not sure if it's going to be Cincinnati, who needs outfielders, if it's going to be Colorado, who has a giant outfield and right now is using Jonathan Daza in center field and has signed Jurison Profar in the spring to play left, who's not here yet. I think he has visa issues. And Chris Bryant and right. It really feels like they're an option to go out and claim Christian Pache off of waivers and make a small deal to get him. But in the meantime, Esteury Ruiz is somebody that hit pretty well. The main return for them in the Sean Murphy deal, they got him from Milwaukee, who got William Contreras, the catcher. So the best player in the deal went to Atlanta. The second best player in the deal went to Milwaukee. The third best player in the deal, arguably who it was, but went to Oakland. Esteury Ruiz profiles as somebody who could theoretically steal, 40 bases this year. And so I expect, if you're in fantasy, I don't think you have to chase stolen bases this year. I think most players with at least average speed are going to get at least 10. But Esteury Ruiz feels like this is the year where he definitely picked the right time to come up and be a prospect, because it feels like he could steal 40 bags easier this year than any other year. And then an interesting scenario in Milwaukee, and we'll get into it a little bit more in the third segment, but second baseman Brice Turang makes the team. Keston Hiura, former top prospect, former top 10 overall pick, I want to say 2017, he was like number 9 overall. He's going to be designated for assignment and is probably going to end up being traded to someone else. Had a great debut year, 2.5 WAR, like 20 home runs in 80 games, and just never really kind of got back to it. He ended up had a 115 WRC plus last year, but he also struck out 42% of the time. So they've moved on to Brice Turang. Turang can play a little bit in the outfield, but he's there for second base. Ton of outfielders in the system. Again, we'll get to that later. So really curious to see what happens there. In just a minute, there are some really interesting arms that made their teams this year, including a prospect that's going to get the start on opening day. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is in the final 4 teams, so there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up today and claim your no-sweat first bet. You've got, when it comes to basketball, you've got money line, point spreads, who's going to win the whole championship, all that kind of stuff. When it's baseball, you've got individual player props, you've got division props, you've got team wins, you've got World Series, who's going to lead the league in home runs. Tons of fun stuff in there to go grab, and all of that's on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot. I see what they did there with the basketball pun. Don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you join FanDuel today. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up and learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. There are some top prospects who made their opening day rosters as far as pitchers go. But special consideration needs to be given to one, left-hand pitcher Kyle Muller, for not only making the Oakland A's, but being named the opening day starter. So, 6'7", 250, was a second rounder in 2016 by the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, he was sent over as part of the deal for Sean Murphy. It was veteran catcher Manny Pena. Esteury Ruiz came from the Brewers. Freddie Tarnok, Royber Salinas, and Kyle Muller were the pitchers from the Braves to Oakland. He is the opening day starter for them, last I saw, and a guy that has the best curveball in this system, has a really good fastball as well, and it feels like he's going to do well here. So, 4-pitch guy, fastball's a plus pitch, sits around 95 or so. He can run it up to 98. Really good extension to it, so the perceived velocity, it feels like it's even faster than it legitimately is. Last year, threw it for a strike a ton, like 70% of the time. The whole idea is, I'm going to attack the zone, I'm going to make you swing, I want to get ahead in the count. It's a race to 2 strikes. Like, I want to get 2 strikes before you get 2 balls. And so threw it for a strike a ton. To go along with that, plus slider, upper 80s, when he spent time up at the big league team in Atlanta last year, because I think he got 3 starts, like 12 innings. It was one of the hardest lefty sliders in all of baseball. It's at like 87 miles an hour. And then to go along with that, the curveball, I think it's above average, low 80s, but it's got 2-plane break, so it kind of darts down and away from a lefty, and it darts in towards the feet of a righty. So it's really something where he doesn't throw it for a strike a lot. It's really used to chase. The goal is, I'm going to leave it over the plate on a righty, and it's going to come in below your bat towards your waist, or I'm going to backdoor it to get a strike. The changeup is a pitch that he uses pretty much only against righties, and it's the same idea for him with that. But either way, I like what Kyle Muller does. Really excited to see what he's able to do in Oakland, because we've talked about this before. When you're not a contending team, it's the nicest way to put that. When you're not a contending team, you have the extra runway for some of these prospects to get starts and to learn on the job at the major league level. He spent so much time back and forth between Atlanta and AAA Gwinnett. because the Braves would call him up, he would pitch, and then first time he struggled or had a bad start, they'd send him back down and bring somebody else because they couldn't afford to let him learn on the job. Oakland can let him learn on the job. I look forward to him spending most of the year in the rotation. I think he's going to be fine once he gets past some of the initial growing pains. He got 8 starts in Atlanta in 2021, 4.17 ERA in 36 innings. So the stuff is there. He struck out about 9 guys per 9 at the major league level. The walks were a little higher than you'd love. Some of that's understanding how these big league hitters, what they're going to chase, how you can use that hard lefty slider against them, and when the changeup is effective and what counts against major league hitters. So, like what Kyle Muller does, very excited to see him on opening day as the starter for the Oakland A's. The Cubs have given Hayden Wesneski a job. He's not an opening day starter, but he has made the team. So he was acquired from the Yankees in the Scott Efros deal, 2019 6th rounder out of Sam Houston State. But the cool thing here is he throws both 4-seamers and 2-seamers, sits, mid-90s. He can run them up to 96, 97 or so, get tons of ground balls. Just not a lot of guys can square these things up that well. The slider is probably the best pitch that he has. 2-plane break. He can leave it for a strike and you'll swing and miss, or he can take it out of this zone and make you chase. He's got a cutter as well, and then a changeup. Changeup needs to be better. It's mostly there for lefties, but I feel good about him making the big league roster. His stats in Iowa, once he got traded, like he was in AAA Scranton Wilkes-Barre, 19 starts, 3.51 ERA. Looked really good. His stats in Iowa weren't the greatest on the adjustment. He got 20 innings, 5.66 ERA. A little bit of a struggle. Some of that may have just been everything that goes along with being 23, 24 years old and getting traded. But when he got promoted to the bigs, appeared in 6 games, 4 of those were starts, 33 total innings in the bigs in Chicago last year. 2.18 ERA, 33 strikeouts, so exactly 9 strikeouts per 9, to only 7 walks, so 1.9 walks per 9. Looked like a control artist, did really well. I'm very excited to see him in the back end of the rotation. Probably something where the Yankees are kind of wishing they had him right now with all of the injuries they have in the rotation as of the moment. Hunter Brown of the Astros, another pitcher. He should make the roster. He was pulled from a spring training start over the weekend because of some lower back tightness. He threw a bullpen. Word is he's supposed to be fine. He'll probably be the last starter, the 5th starter, so you don't really need him till the beginning of next week, but he should make the team. And then the position battle we were watching in Atlanta between Jared Shuster and Dylan Dodd, the 2 lefty prospects, it looks like they are both going to make the team. So Kyle Wright, who led Major League Baseball in wins last year with 20, another one of those Braves prospects that kept coming up. He'd do well, and then when he struggled, he'd go back down. He came up, and he stayed doing well all year, and he ended up leading the league in wins. But he had some shoulder soreness over the winter, got a cortisone injection in January. It delayed the start of his spring. He's only pitched once or twice. He was supposed to get one more start against minor leaguers before being ready for the season. They've decided they're going to give him a couple starts, multiple starts, probably 2 or 3 in AAA Gwinnett. So that means Jared Shuster and Dylan Dodd, who were competing for the 5th spot, they now both get spots. Jared Shuster will start the 3rd game of the year. It's the final game of the series against Washington. He's from Marion, Massachusetts, so it's a little bit closer to his family. Apparently they're all coming down for the game. And then Dylan Dodd will get one of the starts. I think it's game 2 in St. Louis. He's from Illinois, went to Southeastern Missouri College. I don't know if it's college or university. But so he gets a start near his family, and they're all probably going to be coming in for that game as well. I think it's really kind of cool how that worked out for both of these guys, and the team probably did that on purpose. Charlie Morton normally would be the 3rd starter behind Fried and Spencer Strider. So I think it's really neat that they moved him to 4 so that Shuster could get the start near his home and Dodd could get one near him. Kyle Wright is supposed to be fine in time for the homestand to open the season. So one of these guys is probably at risk of getting sent back down depending on if Kyle Wright's ready or not. Not sure who it's going to be. But either way, really excited that these pitchers, these prospect pitchers, have all made their teams for opening day. And there's a couple, both hitters and pitchers, that we're surprised didn't make their team on opening day. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends with Pro Baseball GM. It is the most fun game that I have played in a long time. I always assumed that, I would be a great Major League GM. It seems like it's a great job. Your job is just what guys can I sign? What guys can I draft? Who am I going to extend? I could do this. It's easy. Turns out it's not that easy. The issue here is this thing is so incredibly realistic that you're having to deal with the personalities. It's not just hiring the coaches and staff. It's figuring out the personalities, how open they are to embracing new ideas, how well they work with others, what they personally like to do and believe in versus what your vision for the team is. When it comes to, to free agents, same thing. How are they going to fit in the clubhouse? How do their skills complement what your team wants to do? The personality stuff is not something I necessarily thought about. The draft, same thing. When you're scouting these players, you have to try to, you have to navigate injuries. You have to navigate personalities. Makeup is so hard to understand, what the makeup of this player is going to be before you draft them, which is just like real life. And so there's a lot more that goes into it than I initially realized, but it's tons of fun. And it's a great way to kind of sit and have a new appreciation for what these baseball general managers do and be entertained. The great part is Ultimate Baseball GM, completely free. It's playable offline. You can play on the go whenever you want, as much or as little as you want. It doesn't link back to real life time as far as you have to log in every so often to do things. It's just when you open it up, you pick up where you left off. You do it whenever you want to. So, Locked On MLB Prospects listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when you use the promo code Locked On in the game store. Make sure to check it out. To download the game, visit probaseballgm.com. If you're on YouTube, scan the QR code on the screen or just look it up in the app stores. probaseballgm.com. It's the ultimate baseball GM app. Start your dynasty today. Some really interesting decisions about guys who did or did not make their opening day rosters. So, looking at some of this, it's just really surprising. The big one to me, I think the two big places that stood out to me, number one is Baltimore. Okay, Gunnar Henderson made the roster. Not worried about that. He's probably going to either start at short or start at third. Depends on what they want to do. It may be like Jorge Mateo at short and Gunnar at third. I'm not sure. But Grayson Rodriguez did not make the opening day roster. We thought Grayson Rodriguez was going to be a starter last year before the lat injury significantly delayed the start of his season. And obviously, lat injuries are one of those muscular things that you worry a lot about. He got innings in last year, but not as many as you thought. But either way, they have said he is starting off at AAA in 2023. I don't love this for a few reasons. One, I drafted him in my redraft team, and so he's using a roster spot right now without being in the bigs. But not being selfish, it's just something where, again, you have the prospect promotion incentive where if a guy is in the top 100 for two of the three lists, Baseball America, MLB Pipeline, and ESPN, which Grayson Rodriguez is, if they are up on if they accumulate a year of service time, which he probably will, and they are up on opening day, then you as in the organization, can get compensated for their finish in the Rookie of the Year race. And then they become eligible for other awards as far as before arbitration. If they get votes for Cy Young or MVP, you can get additional compensation there. So I went through the list on Tuesday's show when we did our Rookie of the Year draft with Jeff. Went through the list. All of those teams can get extra draft picks if those players have breakouts in years 2 or 3. Grayson Rodriguez right now has the 5th best odds for AL Rookie of the Year. He has the best pitcher odds at plus 1,300. And instead of having Grayson Rodriguez in your rotation to start the year, the Orioles are going with Kyle Gibson, Kyle Bradish, Tyler Wells, who was a Rule 5 pick from like 2020, Cole Irvin, and Dean Kramer. And it's something where I don't understand the decision to hold him back. Are you trying to get an extra year of service time? Because if he's as good as we think he is, you could keep him for 3 weeks, which is enough to delay him getting a year of service time. And then he, depending on what happens in the American League, he still might finish up in the top 2 for Rookie of the Year voting and get the year of service time anyway. So, blows my mind. I was really hoping they would do a situation similar to what Atlanta did last year with Michael Harris and Spencer Strider, where Gunnar Henderson and Grayson Rodriguez were 1 and 2 in Rookie of the Year voting. I thought that would have been fantastic. So, frustrating there. The Mets didn't pick any of their potential rookies to come up. They didn't have Brett Baty. They didn't pick Mark Vientos. They didn't pick Francisco Alvarez. They put them all in the minors. And so, looking at third base for the Mets, they're focusing on Eduardo Escobar. That's their guy. Luis Guillorme is their only other backup infielder besides Daniel Vogelbach, who's a DH. And it looks like they're keeping two extra outfielders, Tim LeCastro and Tommy Pham. And it really felt like rather than keeping LeCastro, you would have Baty come in to be the other half of third base, and or you would keep Alvarez to be the other part of the DH with Daniel Vogelbach, especially since you didn't keep Darren Ruff. Now, you've got Omar Narvaez, who they traded for. He's their number 1 catcher. You have Tomas Nido, who offensively is not necessarily great. Do I think there's a situation where they move on from Nido and use Francisco Alvarez as the catcher? There probably is. It's just really frustrating that it didn't happen on opening day, and none of those 3 guys are up. The Brewers, I mentioned this, but Sal Frelick did not make the roster. We saw him in the World Baseball Classic. They're one of their top outfield prospects because they have a million of them. Joey Weimer, the big power hitter, also did not make the roster. And so right now, what you're looking at, and this is all, mind you, with Tyrone Taylor being out with the sprained elbow he suffered in February 2023. I don't know how severe a sprained elbow is, but it does not sound like it's fun. So, thoughts to Tyrone Taylor on that? That feels like it probably, I think the only injury worse than that is what Austin Wells, the catcher prospect for the Yankees, dealt with last year. But you're looking at an outfield right now of Christian Yelich in left. You've got Garrett Mitchell in center. We love Garrett Mitchell. Incredibly fast prospect. Looked good power-wise last year in the limited sample. You've got Brian Anderson, who they signed as a free agent in January, in right, with Jesse Winker as your DH. Your backup outfielder since Luke Voigt made the team. Your backups look to be Mike Brousseau, who they got in the trade from the Rays last November. He can play, I think, first base, third base, and corner outfield, as well as Owen Miller. If you have a game where Garrett Mitchell goes down, I'm not sure who your immediate go-to is to play center field. I'm assuming you probably go to Yelich and ask him to do it. I don't think Brian Anderson can do it, but it feels like that's the only scenario where you'd see them call up Sal Frelick right away to cover centers if Garrett Mitchell missed some time. He did have a slight hamstring strain this spring, so something to watch for. And then the Dodgers didn't bring up either right-hand pitcher Bobby Miller or Gavin Stone. And to me, it feels like Miller's stuff is better, but Stone is more polished, and that changeup specifically is very good. So I still think there's plenty of runway here for these guys to come up. Your rotation right now is Ryan Pepio made the rotation. He's your 5th starter. You've got Noah Syndergaard at the 4. We'll see how Noah Syndergaard does. Clayton Kershaw at the 3. And then Dustin May, who's coming off of TJ, and Julio Urias. It feels like Miller and Stone are both going to get time up this year. The question is just how soon is it? Is it soon enough for them to impact the Rookie of the Year race? James Outman made the team as an outfielder. Going to talk more about him tomorrow. Really kind of excited. We haven't really discussed what James Outman can do, so stay tuned for that. Fantastic week this week because, again, baseball's here. Tomorrow, doing some deep dives on some of the prospects that made opening day rosters. In the meantime, if you have questions for the mailbag, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com, or drop your questions in the Locked On MLB Prospects Discord. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. Until tomorrow's show, remember, it's always a good time to pay a minor leaguer.